The crystal chandelier in the top-floor banquet hall of Shaw Group hung overhead like a frozen galaxy. Its light was sharp and cold, exposing every face in the room without mercy. The long conference table gleamed with matte black polish. Around it sat men and women in perfectly tied neckties and spotless suits, their cuff links flashing under the lights, even their breathing measured and restrained. The faint tail of expensive perfume mixed with the bitter remains of cigar smoke in the air, wrapping the room in an invisible layer of silence. At the head of the table, Serena Shaw sat like a blade. Her burgundy suit was cut with ruthless precision, sharpening the line of her shoulders and the tight edge of her jaw. The pen between her fingers turned half a circle, then tapped lightly against the table. Tap, 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 like the second hand of a countdown. "This year's performance," she said, her voice not loud, yet thin and sharp enough to slice through the silence, "has been excellent. Especially the marketing department. They exceeded the target by 40%. The moment her words fell, more than a dozen gazes shot toward the man on her right. Accurate. Quick. Carrying the unspoken flattery and testing that everyone in that room understood. Ryan Zhao. He slowly smoothed an almost invisible crease on his suit sleeve. The curve of his smile looked measured with a ruler. 3 parts modesty, 3 parts composure, and 4 parts carefully controlled brilliance. "It was all thanks to Ms. Shaw's leadership," he said gently, every word polished until it pleased the ear. Serena did not respond. She only pulled a sheet of paper from the dark gray folder before her. The edge of the page still carried a faint warmth from the printer. "So, the board has unanimously approved." She paused. Her gaze swept slowly across the room, as if counting chips on a gambling table. "A special bonus for Director Zhao. 37 million yuan. After tax." The room did not gasp. The breath seemed to collapse out of it, as if someone had pulled away the air beneath every chair. 37 million. That number fell into the room so heavily that it made people's eardrums tighten. Several older shareholders instinctively touched their cuffs and exchanged quick glances. But their lips stayed pressed tight. No one said a word. Serena Shaw held 51% of the shares. If she nodded, that was the final judgment. Ryan stood with his wineglass. The red wine shook out a soft ring of light. "Thank you for your trust, Ms. Shaw. Thank you all for your support." He raised his glass, but his gaze drifted like a thin wisp of smoke toward the end of the table, where a man sat almost swallowed by shadow. Ethan Yi. He wore an ordinary gray cotton shirt. Sleeves rolled to the middle of his forearms, exposing a clean line of wrist bone. Before him sat only a glass of water. Condensation had gathered on the side of the glass. Fine and quiet. Just like him. Still. Dry. Almost without presence. From the beginning of the banquet until now. He had not turned a page. Had not touched the water. And had not even blinked more than necessary. Until this moment. That violates procedure. His voice was not loud. He had not raised it by even half a pitch. Yet it landed in the room like a block of ice dropped into boiling oil. The air in the banquet hall snapped tight. Serena's brow lifted. Her gaze slanted toward him like a blade. "What did you just say?" Ethan raised his head. His eyes were so calm they hardly seemed human. They were more like 2 deep wells, with old, unopened stone tablets settled at the bottom. "I said," he repeated, his tone steady, "this violates procedure. A special bonus is a major compensation adjustment. It must be reviewed by the compensation committee and approved by a vote of all shareholders. You do not have the authority to decide this alone." A short laugh suddenly sounded. The CFO, a balding man with gold-rimmed glasses, slowly pushed the edge of his frames. "Mr. Yi," he said, the corners of his eyes creasing with amusement. "Perhaps you really aren't familiar with our company system. As the controlling shareholder, Ms. Shaw has final approval authority over special expenditures under 50 million yuan. It's legally permitted. Written in the charter. No vote required. That applies to ordinary operating expenses," Ethan said, his voice still flat. "A bonus is not an operating cost. It is a change to the compensation structure. Under Article 173 of the company law, compensation plans must be proposed by the compensation committee, approved by the board, and voted on by the shareholders' meeting. Would you like me to recite the rest of the article and the implementing rules too? The CFO's finger froze halfway to his glasses. Serena set down her pen. The metal tip struck the tabletop with a crisp sound. She leaned back into the leather chair, her spine straight as a ruler, her voice soaked in ice water. Ethan Yee. This is not an exam room for you to show off your legal knowledge. I'm only reminding you. Ethan said. You won't be able to transfer this money today. I won't be able to transfer it. Serena suddenly laughed. That laugh was cold and bright, like the tip of a knife scraping glass. I am the chairwoman. I reward whoever I want. And you? A nominal director. 8,000 yuan a month. Even your badge was issued under a temporary worker category. What gives you the right to point fingers here? The words were brutal. Brutal enough to strip off a layer of skin in public. Several executives immediately lowered their heads and pretended to look at their phones. But their shoulders shook slightly. The corners of their mouths could not help rising. They did not even bother hiding their delight. Ryan sat down again. The red wine in his glass swayed gently. The pride in his eyes rose like tidewater, spilling over the shore and flowing straight toward Ethan. Ethan did not look at him. He took out his phone. The screen lit half his face. Time, 7:42 and 3 seconds p.m. One last reminder, he said, his voice low enough to sound almost like he was speaking to himself. Withdraw the transfer order now. There is still time. Withdraw. Serena's shoulders trembled as if she had heard a line from an absurd play. The client resources Ryan brought in are enough to feed 3 subsidiaries. 37 million. He is worth 10 times that. She grabbed the tablet, her finger sliding across the screen with clean, decisive movements. The transfer interface appeared. Recipient, Ryan Zhao. Amount, 37,000,000,000. Note, annual special bonus. She turned the screen toward Ethan as if displaying a trophy. See this. The password is already entered. All I have to do is press confirm. And you? She paused. Her smile grew dark. Other than sitting here preaching logic, what else can you do? Ethan stared at her. 3 seconds. His lashes did not tremble. His throat did not move. Even his breathing did not change. Then he said, if you dare press confirm, I will withdraw the investment. Dead silence. Even the sound of the central air conditioning seemed to be choked off. A few seconds later, laughter exploded like a string of firecrackers. The CFO laughed so hard his glasses slid down the bridge of his nose. He pushed them back up while wiping the corner of his eye. Withdraw the investment. Director Yi. Did someone mix fake liquor into your water? That tiny bit of stock you have in the company was probably a souvenir Miss Shaw gave you out of charity. Right. What is it? Not even 3%. Withdraw. Withdraw for who to see? He probably can't even come up with 37,000. And he's talking about withdrawing capital. Someone muttered in the corner. Voice low but not low enough. Serena laughed until she leaned forward and back, her shoulders shaking violently, as if the final layer of her mask had finally been torn away. Ethan Yee, she said after the laughter stopped, frost gathering in her eyes. Do you know what annoys me most about you? You're poor enough to rattle. Yet you insist on pretending to be important. Withdraw. Fine. Withdraw. Today. I'll let you watch with your own eyes how worthless your empty bluff is to me. She turned back to the tablet. Her thumb hovered above the confirm button. Open your eyes and watch carefully, she said. Then she pressed down hard. Fingerprint verification flashed green. The screen changed. Transfer processing. Ryan raised his glass toward Serena. Thank you, Ms. Shaw, for your generosity. You deserve it. She smiled. The curve at the corner of her eyes was gentle as spring water. Then she turned and nailed her gaze to Ethan's face, waiting for him to lose control. Rage. Storm out. Anything. Even a pale face would have counted as her victory. But Ethan did not move. He only glanced at his phone again. Then, slowly, he removed his watch and placed it on the corner of the table. Black dial. Silver hands. Silent movement. Yet it seemed to step directly on everyone's nerves. 5 minutes. He said. What 5 minutes? Serena frowned. Impatience already in her voice. For large bank transfers, the standard processing buffer is 5 minutes, Ethan said. From the moment the instruction is submitted to the moment the funds truly enter the account, there is a 5-minute window. During those 5 minutes, you can still withdraw it. I won't withdraw it. I know, Ethan said. So I'm giving you 5 minutes. And I'm giving myself 5 minutes. It sounded insane. Serena completely lost patience. She turned to Ryan. Ryan. Next week's charity dinner. You'll come with me. Chairman Lee specifically asked to meet you. He said he has 3 hardcore projects waiting for you to choose from. I'll be there on time. Ryan said. His smile blooming like a flower. Everyone immediately gathered around them. Glasses touched. Laughter rose. Director Zhao really is young and talented. Shaw Group's future will depend on you from now on. 37 million. I probably won't make even the loose change in my whole life. Voices swelled. Wineglasses clinked. No one glanced at the corner again. Ethan sat there like an old painting that had been forgotten on a wall. He looked at his watch. The second hand moved forward. 1 tick at a time. Calm to the point of cruelty. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. The CFO drifted over with a wineglass. The remains of a smile still on his face. Director Yi. Don't be so tense. Come on. Have a drink. You're still technically on the board. You have to maintain the appearance at least. Ethan did not lift his head. 4 minutes and 50 seconds. Serena and Ryan clinked glasses. The red wine traced a soft arc along the glass wall. To happy cooperation. She said. Forever happy. He replied. 5 minutes exactly. The watch gave a very faint beep. At that same second, the phone in Ryan's trouser pocket vibrated violently. He pulled it out. His pupils suddenly widened. His voice shot upward. It's here. Ms. Shaw. It arrived. The screen was bright. The bank notification was painfully clear. Your account ending in 8808 received a transfer of 37,000,000 yuan at 19 hours 47 minutes and 3 seconds. Current balance. Ryan raised the phone high like he was lifting a medal. It really arrived. Congratulations. Director Zhao. We're not leaving until we're drunk tonight. Applause. Cheers. And laughter surged up, almost flipping the ceiling. Serena smiled with satisfaction. Then her gaze returned to Ethan. She wanted to catch every inch of collapse on his face. Anger. Shame. Humiliation. Despair. But she froze. Ethan was smiling. Not a cold smile. Not a mocking smile. Not a bitter smile forced into place. It was a relaxed smile after a heavy burden had been set down. A calm smile after the dust had settled. A kind of peace that was almost merciful. He picked up the watch and fastened it back onto his wrist. Then he stood. The legs of his chair scraped briefly against the marble floor. Sharp and unpleasant. The noise in the room stopped. Every gaze was drawn to him as if by a magnet. Finished laughing? He asked. No one answered. The money arrived. Happy. Still no one spoke. Ryan put away his phone. His smile had not fully faded. Mr. Yi. Business depends on strength. Not feelings. If you're not convinced, why don't you? He did not finish. Boom. The heavy wooden doors of the banquet hall were knocked open from outside. Not pushed open. Knocked open. The doors slammed into the wall so hard even the crystal chandelier shook. 6 people stood at the entrance. All in black suits, white shirts, and dark ties. Even the buttons on their cuffs were fastened with rigorous precision. The man in front looked about 50. His hair was slicked neatly back. He carried a matte black briefcase and stood as straight as a spear. Behind him were 2 younger men, lean and sharp-eyed. And behind them, 3 people in bank uniforms. Their employee badges reflected cold light. Their expressions were as solemn as if they were attending a funeral. The hall fell into silence. Serena set down her glass with a slap. Her voice tightened. Who are you? Who let you in? The man in the black suit ignored her. His eyes swept quickly across the faces in the room. Then stopped firmly on Ethan's. He strode forward. His leather shoes struck the polished marble. Click. 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 Each step seemed to land between heartbeats. Serena's face turned iron blue. Security. Where are the guards? No one answered. The doors were wide open. The corridor beyond was empty. Not even a server could be seen. The man in the black suit stopped in front of Ethan. He bowed slightly. His posture was respectful. Almost devout. Director Yi. Those two words struck through every disguise like bullets. Director Yi. The entire room lost its voice. Serena's wineglass tilted. A few drops of red wine spilled across the white tablecloth, spreading quickly like a small patch of sudden blood. Ryan's smile froze completely. His pupils shrank. His lips parted. But no sound came out. He looked at the man in black. Then at Ethan. His brows twisted into a knot. What did you call him? Serena asked. Her voice stretched tight like a string about to snap. The man in black still did not look at her. He opened his briefcase and took out a neatly bound document, presenting it with both hands. All venture investors have withdrawn. His pace was steady. Every word clear. The withdrawal agreements have been signed. All funds will be transferred out within 24 hours. Ethan accepted the document, casually flipped through 2 pages, and nodded. Only one word. Good. The fake liveliness in the banquet hall deflated like a punctured balloon. The air suddenly tightened. Even the tiny bubbles clinging to the rim of champagne glasses seemed afraid to rise. The shareholders could no longer sit still. Chair legs scraped across marble one after another. Someone stood so suddenly that his suit jacket swept half a glass of orange juice onto the table. Someone leaned close to a neighbor and whispered with lips almost against the other person's ear. Someone gripped his phone so tightly his fingertips turned white. Yet he did not dare take a photo. Withdrawal. Who withdrew? How much? Which venture firms? He didn't even list the names. Ms. Shaw. Say something. Serena's face lost all color in an instant. White as a porcelain shard just pulled from an ice chest. She did not move. But her fingers had dug deep into her palm, leaving 4 crescent-shaped marks in the flesh. Her gaze tore back and forth between the man in black and Ethan like 2 steel wires stretched to the breaking point. Her mind was not blank. It had exploded into fragments. Morgan once trembling while handing over a report and writing the wrong number. Morgan crouching in the finance department to fix a printer. His sleeve smeared black with ink. Morgan's sweat at the back of his neck when he blocked a tax audit for her. The details were too real. So real her stomach twisted. Who are you? She asked. Her voice was dry, like sandpaper scraping wood. Who sent you? The man in black slowly turned. When his gaze swept across Serena, the back of her neck went cold, as if a blade had lightly traced over her skin. Morgan Fan, he said. Current CFO of Shaw Group. CFO. Those words burned into her like red-hot iron. Of course she knew Morgan Fan. How could she not? 12 years ago. From the days when they squeezed into a 6-person shared office to check travel reimbursements worth only a few cents. To now, when he signed off on 8-figure payments from his independent office floor. Every step had happened under her stamp. Her signature. Her approval. But the man before her. She narrowed her eyes and stared at the cold silver eagle emblem on his tie clip. At his perfectly trimmed temples. At the emotionless eyes behind his glasses. It was Morgan's face. But beneath the skin, the bones had clearly been replaced long ago. Morgan. Her throat tightened. Even her breathing stuck in her chest. When did you? I have always been Director Ye's man. He said flatly, as if reading the weather report. Since the day I joined 12 years ago. The entire banquet hall erupted like oil thrown into boiling water. What? 12 years ago? Wasn't that the day the company was registered? Serena's knees weakened. She pitched forward and barely grabbed the edge of the table before she fell. Her knuckles turned blue from the force. The skin around her nails lifted in tiny white flakes. Like a dry riverbed cracking apart. Impossible. Her lips moved. The sound was so low only she could hear it. Ethan Yi. You. Ethan closed the blue document in his hand as gently as if he were closing an old photo album. He handed it back to Morgan. But his gaze went to the 3 bank employees at the door. That side. Is it done? Morgan nodded and lifted his chin slightly toward the entrance. The 3 bankers immediately walked forward. Their heels struck the tiles like a countdown drum. The man in front was in his 40s. The top button of his shirt was fastened perfectly. The words branch president on his badge reflected matte light under the chandelier. Mr. Yi. He took a stack of A4 papers from his briefcase. The pages were so neatly aligned they looked sharp enough to cut skin. At your request. Our bank has legally frozen all 17 corporate accounts of Shaw Group. Basic accounts. General accounts. Special purpose accounts. Without exception. The total amount currently frozen is 638 million yuan. He spread the documents open across the long table. White paper. Black ink. A red seal so vivid it looked like a fresh bloody fingerprint. Serena lunged forward and snatched up the file. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the corner of the page. The papers rattled like a flock of startled white birds. Frozen. On what grounds? She lifted her head. Eyes red. These are my accounts. My name, Serena Shaw, is on the business license. The branch president did not look at her. He took out another document and pushed it in front of her. Equity pledge agreement. The paper was new. The ink still seemed fresh. Her signature in the lower right corner was bold and sweeping. The terms were written clearly. 51% of Shaw Group shares under Serena Shaw's name were pledged to the bank for an 800 million yuan loan. Used for business operations. With a 3-year term. Signing date, 3 months ago. Serena stared at that date. Her mind buzzed as if someone had struck her over the head with a hammer. This. I signed this. Her voice floated. Carrying a sob even she did not recognize. But this was a legitimate loan. The company was short on cash flow. I pledged my shares. What's wrong with that? That is exactly where the problem is. The branch president said calmly. As if discussing lunch. Legally speaking. Those shares never belonged to you. Dead silence. Even the faint airflow from the air conditioning seemed to vanish. Ryan frowned and instinctively touched the check in his suit pocket. That thin piece of paper worth 37 million now burned against his fingers. What do you mean? He blurted out. His voice an octave higher than usual. How can Ms. Shaw's shares not be hers? The branch president did not answer. He stepped aside half a step. Ethan stood. He did not look at Ryan. Nor did he look at the shareholders. He walked straight to Serena and took the pledge agreement from her hand. When the paper left her fingertips, Serena felt a dizzying sense of weightlessness. 3 months ago. On the day you signed this agreement. Ethan said. His voice not loud. Yet sharp enough to pierce every eardrum. I said one sentence in your office. Wait a little longer. Don't rush to pledge it. Serena trembled all over. She remembered. It had been raining that day. He had stood across from her desk. His suit sleeves rolled to his forearms, exposing wrists with faint blue veins. At the time, she had been busy replying to Ryan's messages. Not even lifting her head. What do you know? She had snapped. The bank is already calling my phone to push for payment. And what had Ryan said afterward? Ethan Yi is afraid you'll become too strong. He's afraid you'll leave him behind. The more he stops you, the more you have to sign. So she signed. Cleanly. Decisively. Without even pausing the pen. Her lips trembled like a fish out of water. I thought. You thought I was holding you back. Ethan finished for her. You thought I was useless. Incapable. Unworthy of you. President Shaw. You thought Ryan Zhao was the one truly helping you. Bringing investment. Preparing the IPO. Putting you on the cover of financial magazines. He paused for 2 seconds. His gaze swept across Ryan's pale face. So you pledged the shares and borrowed 800 million. Of which 37 million was just transferred into Director Zhao's personal account under the name of a special project bonus. The remaining 43 million. You planned to acquire 2 medical device startups. Then spend 20 million hiring an investment bank for IPO counseling. So you could ring the bell next year. Serena stumbled back half a step. Her lower back hit the cold marble column. Every word was correct. Every sentence cut open the most hidden part of her plan like a surgical knife. How could you? Her voice was hoarse. How could you possibly know? Because those shares were never yours from the first day. Ethan took another document from Morgan. The paper was yellowed. Its edges worn and soft. As if it had been touched countless times. 12 years ago. Shaw Group was registered. He opened the first page. His voice was calm as an old well. Registered capital, 5 million. You contributed 500,000 and held 10%. I contributed 4,500,000 and held 90%. He raised the document high. The stamp from the business registry was clear and square. The shareholder list was unmistakable. First line, Ethan Yi. Capital contribution, 4,500,000 yuan. Shareholding ratio, 90%. Second line, Serena Shaw. Capital contribution, 500,000 yuan. Shareholding ratio, 10%. Impossible. Serena screamed. Her nails dug into the gap of the pillar. This company was built by me. You only ran errands, ordered boxed lunches, and helped clients move samples. You can't even make a PowerPoint deck. Would a man who only ran errands pay 4,500,000? Ethan asked lightly. Or have you forgotten where the startup capital came from? Serena opened her mouth. No sound came out. It was as if a ball of burning cotton had lodged in her throat. Later, when the company valuation reached 200 million. You thought I held too many shares. Ethan continued. As if reading a judgment he had memorized long ago. You said it affected your image as a female entrepreneur. You said the outside world would think you relied on a man to rise. You said you wanted to stand upright as the boss. So I signed a nominee shareholding agreement. He presented the second document. The paper was thick. The binding was new. On the cover, 6 black words read, Nominee Shareholding Agreement. They looked like 6 cold bullets. Article 7 states clearly, without written consent from the actual investor, the nominee shareholder may not dispose of the nominee shares without authorization, including transfer, pledge, guarantee, or any other form of encumbrance. He looked straight into Serena's eyes. Before pledging them, did you ask me? Serena felt all the blood in her body flow backward. Her fingertips went numb. Of course she had not asked. She had not even cared to remember which way the door of his family home opened. So this pledge was invalid from the beginning. Ethan turned to the branch president. Your bank's freeze is entirely legal. The branch president nodded. Yes. And because there are major defects in the pledge procedure, our bank has activated its risk disposal plan. If written confirmation from the actual shareholder cannot be provided within 7 days, the pledged shares will be auctioned according to law. Auction. The word struck Serena's temples like 2 iron hammers. She would lose everything. The company. The title. The gilded words chairwoman on her business card. Maybe tomorrow morning. Even the driver would no longer be waiting downstairs. No. She shook her head. Tears struck the back of her hand and spread into dark marks. Ethan Yi. You can't do this. I'm your wife. Wife. Ethan suddenly laughed. That smile never reached his eyes. It was like a thin layer of frost on a glass window. When Ryan Zhao was counting 37 million in cash. Why didn't you remember you were his sister-in-law? When the entire room laughed at me for wearing cheap clothes. Why didn't you remember you were my wife? Serena stood frozen like a paper figure whose bones had been removed. Tears blurred her entire face. Mascara ran into 2 black streaks down her cheeks. Only then did Ryan finally react completely. He turned on his heel and tried to slip toward the door. But 2 young men in black suits blocked him immediately. The one on the left lifted his hand and lightly pressed his thumb against his earpiece. The one on the right stepped half a pace forward, the tip of his shoe almost touching Ryan's polished Oxford. Director Zhao. The young man said softly. His voice like the hiss of a snake. That step was a little too quick. Ryan's back hit the doorframe with a dull thud. Cold sweat slid down his temples and into his collar, soaking a small patch of his shirt. Mr. Yi. His voice trembled. There is a misunderstanding here. This is all a misunderstanding. Ethan ignored him. He turned to Morgan and took 2 new documents from his inner suit pocket. The papers were thick and stiff. Their edges cut as sharply as blades, reflecting a hard white light under the chandelier. Slap. The first document landed on the table. The sound was not loud. Yet everyone in the room flinched. Divorce agreement. Ethan said, as calmly as if he were naming a dish. I've signed it. Once you sign, we're finished. Serena stared at the paper as if it were a poisonous snake. When did you prepare this? 3 months ago. He answered without hesitation. The night you stayed out for the first time and claimed you were at Director Zhao's place optimizing the financing plan. Serena's lips trembled violently, as if an electric current had struck her. The second document. Ethan threw out another. Asset liquidation schedule. Shaw Group has $120 million in book assets and $180 million in liabilities. $40 million of short-term loans mature on the 15th of next month. He paused. His gaze finally pinned Ryan in place. As for the $37 million you just received, that was not a bonus. It was the company's last liquid cash. Serena Shaw. You approved it under the name of Strategic Talent Incentive, correct? Serena said nothing. Her throat felt stuffed with soaked cotton. Misappropriation of company funds. Ethan said, enunciating each word like hail striking glass. The amount is especially huge. As the actual controlling shareholder, I have the right to report this to Economic Crime Investigation. No. She suddenly screamed, her voice splitting. It was a board resolution. Every director signed it. Board resolution. Ethan smiled coldly. Ask them who nodded. His gaze swept the table like a blade. The shareholders who had just raised glasses to Ryan lowered their heads one after another. One stabbed at his phone screen. Another stared into an empty wineglass as if studying the watermarks at the bottom. Someone faked a cough and covered his whole face with a handkerchief. Director Wang. Ethan called. The heavy-set man on the left shook all over and hurriedly wiped his forehead. Did you approve it? I. His Adam's apple rolled. Ms. Shaw said. Said it was only a procedural matter. Director Lee. The woman with glasses hurriedly waved her hands. I didn't know. I really didn't know it was company funds. Director Liu. I didn't sign. I never even saw the document. Excuses rose like the tide. Serena stood there as if she had been stripped naked and thrown into a freezer at -20 degrees. She looked at those familiar faces. Director Wang, who had rushed to carry her bag last week. Director Lee, who praised her aura yesterday. Director Liu, who had said last month that he wanted to introduce his son as her assistant. Now they did not even have the courage to look at her for one extra second. You all. Her voice shattered. You all clearly. Ms. Shaw. You cannot say things like that. Director Wang cut in. His voice suddenly loud. I never participated in the whole process. Yes. Exactly. We were all kept in the dark. When a wall falls, everyone pushes. Even the wind joins in. Only after the noise gradually weakened did Ethan speak. So, the $37 million was misappropriated company funds. He looked at Ryan, as if looking at a scrapped item waiting to be processed. Director Zhao. I'm afraid that money is not easy for you to hold. Ryan's legs weakened. He only stayed upright because the doorframe supported him. Alarm bells rang wildly in his head. His fingers unconsciously dug into the carved wood of the doorframe, filling the gaps under his nails with splinters. What now? The money had just entered his account. It had not even warmed up yet. If the words misappropriation of company funds were truly established, he would have to vomit out every cent. And he might spend the next few years counting ceiling tiles behind bars. Mr. Yi. His throat tightened. He forced out a smile, the corners of his mouth twitching as if pulled by strings. There really is a misunderstanding here. Ms. Shaw personally told me this was an annual special bonus. I believed her. I really knew nothing about the inside story. Oh. Ethan lifted his eyelids. His brow rose slightly, like the edge of a blade cutting across water. Then now. You know. I'll return it. I'll return it right now. Ryan fumbled for his phone. His fingers shaking so badly he could barely hit the screen. Cold sweat ran from his temples into his collar. I'll transfer it back immediately. Not 1 second's delay. No rush. Ethan said flatly. No emotion in his voice. He turned and walked back to the long table, his fingertips brushing across the deep blue cover of the Shaw Group Asset Liquidation Report. He opened one page. The paper made a crisp sound. Let's first talk about the company's current situation. He lifted his eyes. His gaze swept across all shareholders like a silent spotlight. According to this newly issued liquidation report, Shaw Group's net book assets are -$21 million. The bank has completely stopped lending. 3 venture capital firms have fully withdrawn. On the 15th of next month, 40 million in short-term debt will mature. There is no possibility of renewal. He paused, waiting for the sentence to sink into everyone's ears. In plain language, this company will not last 30 days. Boom. The banquet hall seemed to be hit by a silent bomb. Chair legs scraped the floor one after another. Everyone stood up at once. Faces turning from red to blue. Then from blue to gray. Impossible. Finance just sent an email last month saying profit was more than 8 million. Serena Shaw. You have to give us an explanation today. The waves of questioning stacked on one another and smashed straight into Serena. She stumbled back. Her lower back hit the chair. Her whole body swayed, almost collapsing to the floor. I didn't know. She shook her head. Her voice empty. Nails digging into her palm. The financial report was prepared by Ryan. He said there was no problem. I only glanced at it before signing. Ms. Shaw. Ryan was so anxious the veins on his forehead bulged. You cannot say that. You were the one who suggested it. Serena suddenly screamed, tears bursting from her eyes. You said to book receivables due in 3 months as current income. You said to delay supplier payables by half a year. You said the financial statements would look better. And investors would pay only if they looked good. You approved it. You said it was absolutely safe. You said Ethan ye never paid attention to these things. The two pointed fingers straight at each other's faces. Breathing heavily. Faces flushed. Like two cornered beasts. Only moments ago, they had been the golden pair clinking glasses beside the champagne tower. Now they were tearing at each other so thoroughly that nothing remained covered. The shareholders listened with chills down their backs. False accounting. Inflated profit. Misappropriation of public funds. Any one of those was enough to send someone straight into a detention center. Quiet. Ethan spoke. His voice was not loud. He did not raise it even half a degree. Yet it was like pressing the mute button on the entire room. All noise stopped at once. He walked slowly to Serena and stopped close enough to see the tears hanging from her lashes. She lifted her face to look at him. Tears rolled silently. This time, she did not wipe them away. She let her foundation blur and her eyeliner drag into 2 black streaks. She looked like someone stripped of dignity and pushed to the execution ground. Ethan. She reached out. Fingertips trembling. Trying to catch his sleeve. I know I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. For the sake of our 3 years as husband and wife. Ethan shifted slightly to the side. The movement was smooth and natural. Like avoiding a drop of dirty water that was about to fall. Her hand froze in midair. It could not move forward. It could not withdraw. When you transferred the money? Ethan asked. His voice frighteningly calm. Why didn't you think of our marriage? When Ryan Zhao stood on stage giving his acceptance speech and everyone applauded. When you raised your glass and smiled. Did you ever think about me? I sat in the 3rd row corner, holding the divorce agreement, and watched you for 37 full minutes. I only wanted to stabilize morale. With my money. Ethan cut her off. To stabilize your lover's heart. Serena Shaw. Stop acting. I finished reading that little accounting book in your heart 3 years ago. He turned to face the shareholders. His back straight as a blade. Now, I announce 2 things. First, as the actual controlling shareholder of Shaw Group, I am officially initiating bankruptcy liquidation. Tomorrow morning at 9 sharp, the liquidation team will enter headquarters and fully take over all assets, books, and company seals. Second, regarding the 37 million yuan misappropriation case, the chain of evidence is complete. I have entrusted my lawyers to organize everything. Today, I will personally report the case to Economic Crime Investigation. Who handled it? Who signed it? Who instructed it? Not one person will escape. He pulled out a document from his inner suit pocket and gently pushed it toward Serena. The edge of the paper was sharp, like a blade still inside its sheath. Sign it, he said. Once you sign, there will be nothing left between us but debt. Serena stared at the paper. Her fingers were cold. She could not even hold a pen. She could not sign. If she signed, the company would go to zero. The money would have to be returned. And prison might be waiting. And the man she had looked down on for 3 years would step over her wreckage and take everything. No. She shook her head. Voice hoarse. I won't sign. Ethan. Give me one more chance. I'll change. I'll change everything. Chance. Ethan gave a short laugh. Cold. Brief. 3 years. 1,095 days. I poured tea for you. Ate with you. Blocked drinking parties for you. Even paid your mother's hospital bills. Count them yourself. How many chances did I give you? He picked up a pen from the table and placed it in her hand. Sign. The pen was slick. She could not grip it. With a soft clatter, it fell to the ground, rolled twice, and stopped at the tip of Ryan's shining leather shoe. Ryan looked down at the pen. Then he suddenly looked at Ethan. In that flash of lightning, one thought exploded in his mind. He lunged forward. Not toward the pen. Toward Ethan. Director Yi. His knees hit the marble floor with a heavy thud. I was wrong. I really was wrong. I haven't touched the money. I'll transfer it back right now. Please. Please show mercy. He raised his phone with both hands. The screen was still bright, showing the painful green transfer notice. Your account ending in 8891 received 37,000,000,000 yuan at 1923. Look. The money is still there. Not 1 cent moved. I'll transfer it now. His fingers shook as he opened the banking app. Fingerprint unlock failed twice. Only on the third try did it work. I'll transfer it. Right now. Right now. The entire banquet hall was so silent that even the faint electrical hum of the chandelier could be heard. The once smooth, confident Director Zhao was now kneeling on the polished floor, forehead almost against the cold marble. Like a dog with its bones pulled out. Ethan lowered his eyes and looked at him. For a long time. Then he smiled. Not a cold smile. Not a mocking smile. A real smile. One that actually carried a little warmth. Transfer it back. He asked. Transfer it where? Ryan froze. The company's basic account was frozen by the court at 3 yesterday afternoon. Ethan said slowly. Like he was teaching a child who had just started school. You can't transfer it back. Then I'll transfer it to your personal account. Ryan immediately raised his voice. This money was yours to begin with. I'll return it to you exactly as it came. Ethan did not answer. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and lightly touched the glass with his fingertips. Outside, the city lights spread like a sea. Neon flowed. Towers rose. Behind every lit window was a story of someone refusing to accept defeat. 3 years. He had spent 3 years in this city as a shadow. No one remembered his name. They only remembered him as Serena Shaw's husband. A nominal director of Shaw Group. The slightly perfunctory Mr. Yi people used at banquets when they had to toast him. There were even moments when he himself had almost believed it. But tonight, the game was over. Morgan. Yes. Morgan stepped forward and stood straight. Call the police. Ethan said. Misappropriation of company funds. 37 million yuan. Conclusive evidence. Have economic crime investigation come and collect evidence on site. Yes. Morgan took out his phone and dialed. Ryan collapsed onto the floor as if all strength had been drained from him. It was over. Completely over. Serena watched this scene and suddenly began laughing. The laughter was sharp and broken. Like shards of glass scraping a chalkboard. Ha ha ha. She gripped the edge of the table. Shoulders shaking violently. Tears mixing with mascara into 2 black rivers down her face. That's hilarious. Her laughter echoed through the silent hall again and again, making the hair on people's necks stand up. Ryan was still collapsed. Morgan's call had already connected. Hello. 110, I need to report a case. Shaw Group is suspected of misappropriating company funds. Amount, 37 million yuan. Address is. Wait. Ryan suddenly sprang up. Not standing. Crawling on hands and knees. Fingernails scraping the floor and leaving shallow marks. He threw himself at Ethan's feet and hugged his calf tightly. Like a drowning man grabbing a piece of driftwood. Director Yi. Listen to me. He lifted his face. His skin was slick with sweat. His lips were white. This money. I wasn't the only one taking it. Serena Shaw forced me. She threatened me with my son's study abroad guarantee. She said if I cooperated, she would help my whole family immigrate. Everyone sucked in a breath. Serena's laughter stopped. She snapped her head around. Her eyes, poisoned and sharp, pinned Ryan's face. Say that again. Her voice was light as a whisper. And terrifying. Ryan did not look at her at all. He stared only at Ethan. Despair blazing in his pupils. It's true. Director Yi. You have to believe me. She has been transferring assets for a long time. She opened 7 overseas accounts. She said you were just a decoration. Once the company went bankrupt, you wouldn't even get near the liquidation team. Ethan lowered his head and quietly looked at him. Is that so? Every word is true. Ryan nodded frantically, his forehead knocking against Ethan's trouser leg. She also said that once the money arrived, she would fly to Singapore with me. She said she couldn't stay in China anymore. She said sooner or later, you would find out. Ryan Zhao. Serena screamed. She rushed over, heels striking the floor like war drums. She grabbed for Ryan's hair, nails white with force, trying to rip him away from Ethan's leg. You're lying. You were the one who seduced me first. You were the one who gave me a yacht model on my birthday. You were the one who said, when the money comes in, we'll get married. Ryan shoved her away. Hard. Serena stumbled back 3 steps, her elbow striking the table corner. Pain twisted her brow. But she had no time to cry out. She only stared at him. Married. Ryan stood, his face stripped of all flattery, leaving only naked disgust. Serena Shaw. Look in the mirror. What do you still have now? Your shares are frozen. Your credit is blacklisted. Your credit cards are maxed out. You don't even dare tell your relatives your mother is in the hospital. And you still expect me to take you away. Take you to Southeast Asia to sell insurance. Serena froze. She looked at him as if seeing this man for the first time. 10 minutes ago, he had still been holding her waist and whispering in her ear. Serena, I'll only love you in this life. 10 minutes ago, he had still said, once the money arrives, I already booked us a water villa in the Maldives. Now his eyes looked at her as if she were a moldy rag. Ryan. Her lips shook. That's not what you said just now. Just now. Ryan sneered, spittle almost hitting her face. Just now. You still had money. Just now. You were still President Shaw. Now you can't even pay your property fees without writing an IOU. You're worse than a bankrupt madwoman. He turned and dropped to his knees at Ethan's feet again. Director Yi. Look. He raised his phone. Screen still bright. The money really hasn't moved. I didn't even want to pay the withdrawal fee. Give me an account. I'll transfer it immediately. Then I'll disappear forever. Please. Let me go. Ethan said nothing. He took the phone. The screen was cool. The bank app was open. Recipient field blank. Amount field filled in clearly. 37,000,000. 00000. Ryan knelt on the floor, eyes fixed on Ethan's finger without blinking. Director Yi. Give me an account. He said, voice shaking. This money is yours anyway. Returning it to its rightful owner is only natural. The room was quiet enough to hear heartbeats. Shareholders exchanged looks. Someone quietly exhaled. Someone muttered. Right. If the money comes back. Isn't that enough? What's the point of calling the police? Money won't multiply. Settle it privately. If this blows up, it'll look bad for everyone. Serena listened and suddenly laughed again. Not a hysterical laugh this time. A cold laugh. Threaded with blood. Ryan Zhao. She tilted her head, as if watching a clumsy mime. Do you really think transferring it back means you're safe? Do you really think Ethan Yi will let you off? Ryan ignored her. He only stared at Ethan. Director Yi. Say the word. His voice choked. I was wrong. I was possessed. Serena Shaw kept whispering in my ear. Saying you were just a decoration. Saying that money was there to be taken. You're full of shit. Serena grabbed a glass of red wine and smashed it toward him. The glass shattered. Wine splashed over Ryan's head and body. Red as blood. He whipped around. Eyes bloodshot like a cornered beast. Serena Shaw. He screamed until his voice cracked. If you hadn't sent me messages in the middle of the night seducing me, would I have gotten involved with you? If you hadn't spent every day telling me Ethan Yi was useless, would I have touched that money? He stood abruptly. finger stabbing toward Serena's nose. I'm telling you. Today. You are the mastermind. At most. I'm an accomplice. If anyone goes to prison, you'll be the first to wear handcuffs. Serena's face looked like old paper soaked in water. Completely bloodless. Even her lips had turned blue-gray. She opened her mouth. But it was as if an invisible hand had clamped around her throat. Not even a breath came out. The low buzz in the banquet hall stopped. In its place came the harsh scraping of chair legs against marble. The shareholders could no longer sit still. Ms. Shaw. A balding middle-aged man stood abruptly. His trousers tight across his slight belly. His tie crooked. His eyes sharp as knives. You need to give everyone an explanation. He was the third largest shareholder. Director Wang. Usually, he liked to sit at the farthest edge of meetings with a thermos cup, smiling and nodding along. Today, he was the first to tear off that mild mask. That's right. The woman in gold-rimmed glasses immediately followed. Her bright red nails tapping hard on the table. 37 million. That was the company's last living water. You transferred it to Ryan Zhao without telling us. What are we shareholders who invested real money supposed to be? Decorations. How much cash is left in the account now? Can next month's salaries even be paid? Questions struck Serena's temples like dull clubs. One after another. She retreated instinctively. Her heels clicked hollowly against the polished floor. Her back hit the cold wall with a dull sound. Shaking her shoulder blades painfully. I'll find a way. Her voice was so light it was almost swallowed by the heavy breathing in the hall. Find a way. Director Wang laughed coldly. What way? The shares are pledged to the bank. The accounts are all frozen. The company barely has money left to buy printer toner. What are you going to use to find a way? He suddenly turned and nodded slightly to Ethan. His tone instantly softening by 3 degrees. As if he had become another person. Director Yi. Since you are the true person at the helm of this company, you cannot stand aside. He paused. His Adam's apple rolling. His voice suddenly rose. Our hard-earned money was not thrown in here just to hear a splash. Yes. Director Yi. You have to stand up for us. Serena Shaw treated this company like an ATM. She emptied it and planned to run. The executives who had been surrounding Serena moments earlier, handing over business cards and praising her as young and capable, now all shrank back with lowered necks. As if black smoke were rising from her body. The marketing director was the first to jump out. His tie had been pulled half loose. The veins on his neck bulging. Ryan Zhao. You still dare stand here? Last month, you swore there was a 50 million yuan project and asked me to approve a 2 million budget. What happened? Where is the proposal? Where is the contract? Where is the money? The finance manager pushed his glasses. His eyes behind the lenses were cold as ice. Ms. Shaw. Last month you asked me to falsify the accounts and smooth out an 8 million expense. But that money never went into any supplier account. Where exactly did it go? And the month before that? A young woman from legal suddenly spoke. Her voice was not loud, but every word was clear. Director Zhao said he went to Hong Kong for an inspection and reimbursed 500,000. Where is the inspection report? Where is the itinerary? There isn't even a hotel invoice. Last year's year-end bonus. He took 3 million alone. The HR director said with a cold smile. Special contribution award. What contribution? Stamping the company seal on blank checks. The questions surged like a tide. One wave after another. Ryan's face turned from white to blue. Then from blue to gray. Cold sweat dotted his forehead and ran down his temples. He had never imagined these people would turn their faces faster than turning pages. 1 second ago, they were clinking glasses with him and calling him Brother Zhao. The next second, they wanted to nail him to a pillar of shame and drown him with spit. You're all talking nonsense. His tongue knotted. His voice shook. All of those were normal expenses. Every cent has invoices. There are approval procedures. There are signatures. Invoices. The finance manager sneered and pulled a stack of papers from his briefcase. Director Zhao. Should I verify them page by page in front of everyone? Let's see which invoice was issued by a company registered in a rented room in an urban village. Ryan went silent. He suddenly turned to Ethan. His eyes were full of panic and pleading. Like a drowning man grabbing the last straw. Director Yi. Director Yi. Save me. They're kicking me while I'm down. When the money was being shared, why didn't any of them pretend to be so noble? Ethan finally moved. He slowly placed the phone back into Ryan's hand. His fingertips were cold. But his movement was steady, without the slightest tremor. Transfer it, he said. Ryan's pupils widened, as if he had seen a life-saving rope surface. You agree. He snatched the phone. His hands shaking so much he could barely hold it. Give me the account. I'll transfer it now. Immediately. Ethan recited a string of numbers. His pace stable. Like he was reading a menu. Ryan stabbed at the screen like a madman. He was so anxious the veins on his forehead jumped. When he entered the password wrong 3 times and the system popped up locked for 30 seconds, he almost smashed the phone onto the ground. Finally, the transfer page appeared. Confirm transfer, 37,000,000. He did not even blink. His thumb slammed down. Fingerprint verification. Beep. Face recognition. Beep. Transfer successful. The screen glowed blue, reflecting on his bloodless face. He exhaled heavily. His whole body seemed to lose its bones as he collapsed onto the floor. He wiped sweat from his face. Cold. Sticky. All transferred. Director Yi. The money arrived. He raised the phone toward Ethan. His voice carrying the sobbing tone of someone who had survived disaster. Look. It really arrived. Now you can let me go. Right. Ethan took the phone. His eyes swept over the transfer record. Then slowly lifted to Ryan's face. Then he smiled. That smile held no warmth. No real curve. Only an unfathomable chill that made Ryan's spine go cold and the hair on the back of his neck stand upright. Too late. Ethan said. Ryan froze. His lips moved. What is too late? That 37 million was transferred into the Donghai Municipal Integrity account 3 minutes ago. Ethan threw the phone back into his arms. His voice was terrifyingly calm. Morgan just reported everything under his real name to the Discipline Inspection Commission. All involved funds will be frozen, recovered, and traced. Ryan looked as if a bolt of lightning had struck him through the crown of his skull. He froze where he sat. The phone slipped from his hand and hit the marble floor. The screen instantly shattered into spiderweb cracks. His mouth hung open. Only hoarse choking sounds came from his throat, like a fish thrown onto shore, twitching desperately and unable to draw in air. Integrity. Account. His voice floated. Discipline Inspection Commission. What commission? Director Yi. No, that was a private transfer. Ethan did not look at him. He turned and took a document from Morgan. Flipping to the final page. The paper rustled crisply. It sounded like the prelude to a falling guillotine. Ryan Zhao. Former Deputy Finance Director of Zhonghai Group. Ethan's voice was neither high nor low. Each word as clear as an inscription cut into steel. 3 years ago. You were dismissed for misappropriating company funds. Zhonghai Group was concerned about reputational impact and did not report the case. You took a hush money payment and turned around to submit your resume to Shaw Group. The entire hall went silent. Even the chandelier's faint electrical hum sounded piercing. All color drained from Ryan's face, leaving it white as freshly scraped plaster. You. How did I know? Ethan closed the file with a snap. Your little incident at Zhonghai was written plainly in the file. On your first day at Shaw Group, Morgan placed your background check report on my desk. Ryan's knees weakened. He pitched forward, both hands bracing against the floor. His nails dug into the marble seams, making an ugly scraping sound. So these 3 years. He lifted his face, eyes webbed with blood. You were watching me the whole time. Watching you. Ethan gave a short laugh, like ice cracking on a frozen surface. You are not worthy of being watched. I was only waiting for you to show your tail. Then, one clean cut. He turned. His gaze swept across every shareholder in the hall. His voice suddenly sank. Everyone. You all saw where that 37 million just went. Ryan Zhao's first instinct was to transfer the money back to my personal account. That was not conscience. That was fear. He paused. What was he afraid of? He was afraid of the bank flows in his overseas accounts being pulled out. Ryan shuddered as if someone had slapped him. Ethan took another file from Morgan and opened it. Its edges sharp as blades. Ryan Zhao. You have a shell company in the Cayman Islands called Ruifeng International Investment Limited, registered capital $50,000. Over the past 3 years, this company received transfers from 7 different personal accounts in Donghai, totaling 23 million yuan. Of that amount, 12 million came from Shaw Group corporate accounts, laundered through 3 shell companies. Construction material purchases, consulting fees, intellectual property purchases. Each transaction was under 1 million, perfectly avoiding automatic alerts from the banking system. The rest came from Serena Shaw's personal account. Ryan slumped on the floor as if his soul had been emptied out. Even his lips trembled uncontrollably. Serena leaned against the wall. When she heard the words Cayman Islands, her whole body tightened like a string about to snap. Impossible, she murmured, voice like a bubble rising from underwater. He opened a company in the Caymans. How did I not know? Because the beneficiary on that company's registration documents is not you. Ethan turned to look at her. It is Ryan Zhao's personal wholly owned company. He told you 1,000 times about marriage and immigration. Asked you to transfer money into his account as investment immigration threshold funds, right? Serena's back was pressed against the wall. Slowly, she slid downward. She remembered. Last spring, Ryan had wrapped an arm around her waist and whispered in her ear. Serena, life here is too exhausting. Let's go to Singapore. First, transfer the money out and take the investment immigration route. Our children can receive an international education in the future. She had believed him. She transferred 6 million. Then another 5 million. The Singapore dollar investment he talked about. Her voice was hoarse as sandpaper. Her eyes were red. It was fake. Ethan said nothing. He only turned the file to the final page and handed it to her. White paper. Black ink. The bank flow was as clear as if carved with a knife. The account of Ruifeng International Investment Limited held a balance of 23 million yuan. Not a cent had been moved. The recipient column was written with Ryan Zhao's name. That money, Ethan said, was never under your name. From beginning to end. He was lying to you. Serena slid down the wall and sat on the floor. Her knees curled in. Her forehead pressed into them. Her shoulders shook violently as a suppressed sob finally broke from her. Like a cat whose claws had been pulled out. Curled into a corner. Too afraid even to cry loudly. Ryan looked at Serena. His expression suddenly changed. It was a kind of madness born from utter despair. Like a beast at the bottom of a well discovering even the last piece of floating wood had broken. He jerked his head up and roared at Ethan. Ethan Yi. You planned all this from the start. You played useless for 3 years. You watched Serena cheat. You watched me siphon her money out one transfer at a time. You're darker than all of us. Ethan looked down at him. His eyes were calm. As if looking at a piece of trash. You're right, he said. I did know long ago. Ryan froze. But I also knew something else. Ethan stepped forward slowly. Every time his leather shoe struck the polished floor, it made a clear click. If Serena Shaw had not placed the knife in your hand herself, no matter how hard you jumped, you could not have made waves. She was stupid. You were greedy. The two of you were a match made in heaven. The only thing I did was wait. Wait for both of you to nail the coffin shut. Ryan's lips moved violently, like a stranded fish. Then he suddenly threw himself forward and hugged Ethan's leg again. Snot and tears covering his face. Director Yi. Director Yi. I was wrong. I'll confess everything. I'll give you all the passwords to the Cayman accounts. I have 3 more accounts. In Hong Kong, London, and the Virgin Islands. I'll give them all to you. Please don't let the authorities investigate me. I'll go to prison. I really will go to prison. Ethan lowered his eyes and looked at the man who, 3 minutes earlier, had still been strutting around and saying forever happy with Serena's arm around him. Now he lay on the floor like a dog with its tail chopped off. Face smeared with tears and mucus. Shirt wrinkled like a rag. Sit down, Ethan said. Ryan froze. I said, sit down. Ethan's tone was calm. Like he was telling a waiter to refill water. Save your strength. Economic crime investigation is already downstairs. Before his words had even faded, the glass doors of the banquet hall were pushed open from outside. 3 officers from Economic Crime Investigation, dressed in dark blue uniforms, strode in. Their steps were neat and measured, leather soles striking the floor with the precision of a ruler. The officer in front was in his early 40s, with short hair, sharp cheekbones, and eyes as fierce as a hawk's. The badge on his chest reflected a cold glint under the lights. In his hand was a case filing notice stamped with a red official seal. Ryan Zhao. His voice was not loud, but it carried an authority that allowed no argument. Ryan's spine snapped straight. He trembled like a sieve. I am Serena Shaw. The woman curled in the corner slowly lifted her head. Her makeup was already a mess. Mascara ran in 2 black streaks down her face, and her lips had lost every trace of color. I am. The officer nodded and gestured to the 2 younger officers behind him. Take them. The 2 officers stepped forward, one on each side, their movements clean and efficient, as if they had rehearsed this hundreds of times. One pressed down on Ryan's shoulder. The other bent down and took Serena's arm. No! Ryan screamed. His limbs kicked wildly against the smooth floor, his shoes scraping out a shrill sound. I'm not going. I returned the money. I returned all of it. Ethan Yee. Say something. The money already arrived in your account, didn't it? The amount that arrived was 37 million. Ethan said, standing where he was, both hands in his trouser pockets. His tone unhurried. But the total you siphoned out of Shaw Group was 62 million. The remaining 25 million has already been transferred through Ruifeng International to an HSBC account in Hong Kong. Account name, Ryan Zhao. Account ending in 7743. I just had Morgan provide that information to Economic Crime Investigation as well. Ryan's struggling stopped instantly. His eyes bulged wide, bloodshot and terrified. His mouth hung open, yet he could not make a sound. You even know about the Hong Kong account. I told you. Ethan lowered his head slightly and looked down at him. I was waiting for you 2 to nail the coffin shut. The officers were strong. Ryan could not break free at all. They dragged him toward the door by the arms. The tips of his shoes left 2 pale marks across the floor, screeching all the way like the death cry of a wounded animal. Serena did not struggle. She could barely stand. The female officer supported her as she walked out, her steps floating as if she were walking on cotton. When she passed Ethan, she paused for one brief moment. She turned her head and looked at him with hollow eyes. Her lips moved. No sound came out, but Ethan read the shape of her mouth. I'm sorry. Ethan did not respond. He did not even look at her for another second. He merely shifted slightly to the side and gave her a path. The door closed behind her with a heavy thud, like a coffin lid dropping shut. Only the shareholders' heavy breathing remained in the banquet hall. Without Serena's screams, without Ryan's roaring, without clinking glasses and fake laughter, the air suddenly grew thin and quiet, like the sky after a storm had washed everything clean. Director Wang was the first to react. He rushed up to Ethan in 3 quick steps, his fleshy face piled with a smile, both hands rubbing together in front of him as if he were praying for rain. Director Yi. Director Yi. You are the real person at the helm. I said it earlier, didn't I? Serena Shaw was a fox. She hollowed out the company and planned to run. Thank God you were here. You turned the tide. A true hero. The female shareholder with glasses also crowded over, her voice sweet as melted honey. That's right. Director Yi. You should have stepped forward long ago. We all owe you a bow. With you leading the company from now on, we can finally rest easy. 100% easy. Director Liu even pulled out his phone and flashed the screen toward Ethan. Director Yi. I'll have my son report to the company tomorrow. Do you need an assistant? He just got his MBA. Even running errands for you would be fine. The same shareholders who had just been dodging, deflecting blame, and lowering their heads to play with their phones now swarmed over like sharks smelling blood. Their smiles covered their faces. Their eyes were as eager as coals just pulled from a furnace. Ethan stood still. His gaze moved calmly across face after face. These faces. 3 minutes ago, they were calling Serena wise. 6 minutes ago. They were toasting Ryan as young and promising. 10 minutes ago. All of them had been watching him like a joke. Laughing at his cheap clothes. His cold seat. And the idea that he could not even produce 37,000 yuan. Now they had all changed. Faster than pages flipping. More changeable than dogs. Everyone. Ethan spoke. His voice was not high. Yet it formed an invisible barrier, pushing back all that sudden enthusiasm. The company has not gone bankrupt yet. But it is not far from bankruptcy. The shareholders' smiles stiffened. There are only 23 million yuan in liquid funds left on the books. Next month. 40 million in short-term debt must be repaid. Employee wages still need to be paid. Whoever has a way to fill that hole. Step forward. No one answered. The shareholders who had just been tripping over themselves to flatter him now all lowered their heads like schoolchildren called on by the teacher, wishing they could tuck their necks into their collars. Director Wang shrank back half a step and gave 2 dry laughs. Well, Director Yi. I still have something at home. Director Yi. My wife is waiting for me to go home for dinner. I have a business trip tomorrow. Early flight. Excuses spilled out like beans. Ethan smiled. It was a short smile. Clear and detached. The smile of someone who had seen through the coldness of human nature. Relax. He said. Shaw Group will enter bankruptcy liquidation. But I will prioritize repayment of your investment principal. As long as the assets transferred by Serena Shaw and Ryan Zhao can be recovered. You will get your principal back. My word counts. The shareholders looked at one another. Their expressions were as complicated as a palette of mixed colors. Some were relieved. Some were doubtful. Some still wanted to get closer. But one look from Ethan pinned them in place. Their mouths opened. Yet no words came out. Now, please leave. Ethan said. The liquidation team enters tomorrow. Everyone must clear out. The shareholders rushed toward the door as if granted amnesty. Leather shoes. Heavy breaths. Low muttering. Within 30 seconds. Only 4 people were left in the vast banquet hall. Ethan Yi, Morgan Fan, and one man who had never moved from the corner. He sat by the window at the far end of the table. From beginning to end. He had not spoken, had not stood, and had not squeezed out with the others. He was in his early 50s, with graying hair and a dark gray Zhongshan suit buttoned all the way to the top. He sat upright, as still as a stone statue. When Director Wang passed him, he stopped for a moment and said quietly, Mr. Zhou, you're not leaving. The man called Mr. Zhou slowly lifted his eyes. His gaze fell on Ethan. And he smiled. I'll wait. Director Wang opened his mouth. Then decided not to persuade him and hurried away. The door closed. Morgan walked quickly to Ethan's side and lowered his voice. Director Yi. Economic crime investigation says Ryan Zhao's Hong Kong account has already been submitted for international judicial assistance. The freeze should take effect within 48 hours. Ethan nodded. Good. As for Serena Shaw, the detention notice has been issued. Her mother sighed. Should we notify them? Ethan was silent for 2 seconds. Notify her brother. Her mother has a heart condition. Don't tell her directly. Yes. Morgan closed the folder. Turned to leave. Then glanced again at the man in the corner. His eyes carrying a little caution and probing. Ethan gave him a slight nod, signaling that he could leave first. Morgan asked nothing more and pushed the door open. A soft click sounded as the lock shut. Only 2 people remained in the banquet hall. Ethan turned and walked to the corner of the long table. He pulled out the chair across from Mr. Zhou and sat down. The chair legs scraped briefly across the marble floor. He did not rush to speak. He simply met the older man's eyes across the 2-meter-wide table. Outside the window, city lights hung upside down like stars. Neon flowed slowly across the glass curtain wall. Far away, the sea gave off broken silver light. A cruise ship's horn drifted faintly through the night, like an echo from another world. Uncle Zhou. Ethan was the first to break the silence. Mr. Zhou lifted his teacup and took a shallow sip. The tea glowed amber. He set the cup down, the bottom touching the table with a soft tap. 3 years. His voice was hoarse and deep, like old bark scraping together. 3 full years. You finally acknowledge me. The corner of Ethan's mouth moved slightly. It wasn't that I didn't acknowledge you. I couldn't. I know. Uncle Zhou sighed. He took an old fountain pen from his pocket. On the cap, the words founder of Zhou Holdings were engraved in small gold characters. Though the paint had worn in places. Before your father passed, he entrusted the Nanyang business to me. He said, "Old Zhou, keep an eye on Chenfeng for me." He paused. His gaze fell on Ethan's face, as if studying something old and lost that had finally returned. "But you threw everything aside and ran to Donghai. Then married that." Uncle Zhou shook his head and left the rest unsaid. "I saw through that Shaw girl at first glance. Shallow vision. High arrogance. She wasn't even worthy of carrying your shoes." Ethan did not respond. He only picked up the glass of water in front of him, long cold by now, and took a sip. "Uncle Zhou. Nanyang. Nanyang is fine." Uncle Zhou waved a hand. "The business your father left behind. I watched it for you for 3 years. Not 1 cent went missing. Zhou Holdings broke 20 billion in revenue last year. I saved your dividends under your name." He pulled a black card from the inside pocket of his Zhongshan suit and pushed it across the table. The card was pure black. In the upper right corner, the word unlimited was stamped in gold. The edge was slightly worn from age. Exactly 3.7 billion in there. Uncle Zhou said. Ethan looked at the card and did not reach for it. "Uncle Zhou. This money. It's yours." Uncle Zhou cut him off, his tone leaving no room for objection. "Your father left you 60% of the shares. 30% to me. And 10% to a charity fund. In the 3 years you were gone, I saved your dividends for you. Not 1 cent of interest was touched." He pushed the card forward again. "Take it back. Since you revealed your identity today, you'll need to take over the Nanyang business yourself from now on." Ethan was silent for a few seconds. Then he reached out, picked up the card, and lightly ran his thumb along the edge. The black card was slightly heavy in his hand, cold with the texture of metal. 3.7 billion. 3 years earlier, he had come to Donghai from Nanyang with 100,000 yuan in cash in his pocket. He rented a tiny room in an urban village for 800 yuan a month, without even air conditioning. When he interviewed at Shaw Group, HR frowned at his resume. "Nanyang University. Never heard of it. Nominal director. Your education doesn't quite meet the requirement, does it?" At the time, Ethan only smiled and said, "That's fine. I can run errands too." The HR officer curled her lip and threw him a temporary badge. "The marketing department needs someone to move samples. 8,000 a month. You doing it or not?" He did it. For 3 years. In those 3 years, he moved 500 gene worth of exhibition samples. Squeezed into packed morning rush hour subways. Crouched in the finance department fixing leaking printers. Drank until he vomited blood more than a dozen times to shield Serena from drinking sessions. No one knew that the black card in his pocket held a balance of 3.7 billion. No one knew his father was the shipping king of Nanyang. And that Zhou Holdings under his control spanned 7 countries and 42 ports. No one knew that the useless husband who lowered his head in the hallway, mopped floors, and pressed elevator buttons for Serena, held enough capital to buy Shaw Group, tear it apart, and sell the scrap 3 times over. But he endured. He waited. Waited for Serena to show her claws. Waited for Ryan to expose his tail. Waited for that match made in heaven to nail their own coffin shut. And he had waited long enough. "Uncle Zhou." Ethan put the black card into the inner pocket of his suit and stood. "The liquidation of Shaw Group should take about 3 months. Once everything here is clean, I'll return to Nanyang." Uncle Zhou stood too and patted his shoulder. His palm was broad, rough, and warm. "If your father were still alive and saw you tonight, he would be happy." Ethan turned slightly and looked through the floor-to-ceiling window at the lights of the city. He said nothing, but the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. It was a tiny curve, shallow and brief, like the first thin crack opening on winter ice. But it was a real smile. The next morning at 9 sharp, number 88 Financial Street, Jiangning District, Donghai City, Shaw Group headquarters. The 28-story building had once been Serena Shaw's proudest medal. Its exterior was all glass curtain wall, shining under sunlight like a giant blue crystal prism. On the rooftop. The gilded words Shaw Group had been unveiled 3 years earlier with a ribbon-cutting ceremony attended by the deputy mayor. Fireworks had exploded for 20 full minutes that night. Today. Yellow caution tape blocked the building entrance. A red banner from the liquidation team hung above the main doors. White characters on a red background. Square and rigid like writing on a coffin board. Shaw Group Bankruptcy Liquidation Working Team. More than 30 people gathered downstairs. Suppliers clutching account books and contracts. Faces iron blue. Employees holding badges and notices of unpaid wages. Eyes red. Reporters with long lenses and cameras lined up in rows. Flashes popping without pause. Ethan stood before the floor-to-ceiling window of the 20th floor office, looking down at the crowded scene below. Morgan stood behind him with a stack of documents, flipping through pages. Director Yi. The liquidation team has entered. Last night, they froze 6 properties, 3 cars, and 2 safes under Serena Shaw's name, for Ryan Zhao's Hong Kong account. The judicial assistance letter has been sent. We expect a reply tomorrow. Good. The suppliers are emotional. 7 have already sent lawyer letters to recover unpaid goods payments. Total amount is around 8.6 million. Pay them first from the frozen assets. Ethan said. Suppliers' money cannot be owed. Morgan nodded and marked the file. Also, Serena Shaw's brother just called. He said their mother had a heart attack last night and was sent to the hospital. He asked whether Serena could come out to see her. Ethan was quiet for a moment. No. During detention. Non-case personnel may not visit. Tell him I will arrange the medical bills for her mother. He doesn't need to worry about money. Morgan froze for a moment. You still want to pay her mother's medical bills? Ethan turned around and leaned against the window frame. Arms crossed. Eyes calm. Her mother had heart bypass surgery last year. I paid the 120,000 yuan then. Serena said she was busy and never even went to the hospital. I'm not doing this for Serena. Back when I was at my lowest, the old lady made me a bowl of dumplings. That bowl of dumplings was worth 120,000. Morgan asked nothing more. He lowered his head and marked another note in the file. Just then, someone knocked on the office door. Come in. A young man wearing the liquidation team's uniform walked in quickly, carrying a craft paper bag sealed with a red strip. Director Yi. These were found in Serena Shaw's office safe. Please take a look. He placed the bag on the desk and stepped back. Ethan walked over and broke the seal. 3 things fell out. The first was an old yellowed photo. In it, 2 people stood by the sea. A young man in his early 20s wore a white shirt. His features clean and handsome, smiling brightly enough to show his white teeth. The other was Serena Shaw. Her hair was tied in a ponytail. She wore no makeup, only a floral dress, and was standing on tiptoe to hook her arm around the young man's neck. That was Ethan and Serena 12 years ago. The day they registered the company. They had gone to the outskirts of Donghai and taken that photo by the sea. That day, Serena had said, Chen Feng, when the company goes public, let's buy a house by this sea and watch the sunrise every day. Ethan had smiled then. Okay. In the end, the company never went public. The house was never bought. The sunrises had barely been watched. And she had run off with someone else. Ethan stared at the photo for 3 seconds. Then turned it over and placed it face down on the corner of the desk. The second item was a ring. A plain silver band. Inside, 2 small characters were engraved. Feng Gu. Ethan recognized it. It was the wedding ring they had bought when they got married. 20 yuan for the pair from a street stall. Serena wore it for less than 3 months before saying it was too tacky and that they should buy Cartier instead. Then she took it off and tossed it into a vanity drawer. He had not expected her to keep it in the safe for 3 years. Ethan picked up the ring and weighed it in his hand. It was light. 20 yuan merchandise. So light it almost had no weight. He set it back on the desk beside the photo. The third item was a letter. On the envelope, written in black pen. For Ethan Yi. The handwriting was messy. A few water stains marked the corners, as if the person writing it had cried as she wrote. Ethan opened the envelope and pulled out the paper. The paper was thin and carried a faint scent of perfume. Serena's usual brand. Gardenia. sweet to the point of heaviness. The letter was not long. 2 pages. The first page read, Chen Feng. I'm sorry. I know those 3 words mean nothing now. But I still want to write them down. Last night, lying on that hard bunk in the detention center, I could not sleep no matter how much I turned. My mind was full of the past 3 years. I remembered when we first got together. That tiny 6-square-meter room you rented. With no air conditioning in the summer. You always pointed the only electric fan at me, while you sweated through your clothes and still smiled, saying, I'm not hot. I remembered the day the company was registered. You took out a bank card and said, there's 4,500,000 in here. Let's start a business. I asked where the money came from. You said, borrowed. I believed you then and was too lazy to ask further. Now that I think about it, I never even asked who your parents were. I never visited your hometown. I remembered these 3 years. Every morning at 6. You got up to cook porridge for me. At night. No matter how late I worked. You waited for me. I complained that you were an eyesore. That you were useless. That you had no ability. But you never argued with me once. When I cursed at you, you smiled. When I smashed things, you silently picked them up. I kept wondering, when did you change? Or maybe you never changed. Maybe the one who changed was me. I am a complete fool. I believed every sweet word Ryan Zhao said. I drank every glass of wine he handed me. I swallowed every empty promise he painted for me. But every single thing you did for me. The porridge you cooked. The drinks you blocked. The medical bills you paid. I treated all of it as something I deserved. Now it's done. The company is gone. The money is gone. The person is gone too. Sitting in this tiny room, where I can't even see the sky outside the window. I suddenly understand. What I lost was never the company. Not the money. Not the chairwoman's seat. What I lost was you. I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. If there is another life. The letter stopped there. The second page was blank. Only one tiny line sat in the lower right corner. I kept that ring all along. I never threw it away. Ethan folded the letter and put it back into the envelope. His movements were slow and light. Then he placed the envelope, the photo, and the ring neatly side by side on the desk. Morgan stood nearby and did not ask a single question. The office was quiet enough to hear the reporters' shutters downstairs, the suppliers shouting, and the employees crying. Those noisy sounds seemed to pass through a thick wall of glass, blurred and distant, before being swallowed by the silence inside this room. Ethan stood there for a long time, long enough for sunlight to move from the east to the center of the room, dragging a long slanted golden column across the floor. Then he spoke. Morgan. Yes. These. He pointed to the 3 items on the desk. Put them away in a file bag. When Serena Shaw gets out, return them to her. Morgan froze slightly. You're not keeping them. For what? Ethan gave a faint laugh. It was thin and light, like morning mist scattered by wind. These 3 years. I've already repaid every bit of affection I owed. He turned and walked toward the door. Halfway there, he stopped. One more thing. Call the hospital. Pay Serena Shaw's mother's medical bills for 1 year. Don't tell her who paid. Yes. Ethan pushed the office door open and walked into the corridor. At the end of the hallway, the elevator stood open. He stepped inside and pressed the button for the first floor. The elevator descended slowly. The floor numbers changed one by one. 28, 27, 26. Each floor passed like turning one page of an old calendar. 3rd floor. 2nd floor. 1st floor. Ding. The doors opened. Outside was the lobby of Shaw Group. The once bright lobby, where the front desk staff had always smiled sweetly, was now a mess. Cardboard boxes were stacked against the walls. Computer monitors had been removed and piled together. A printer sat on a pushcart. Data cables lay scattered across the floor like tangled snakes. Liquidation staff moved back and forth, sealing items, counting assets, registering records, their steps messy and hurried. In the center of the lobby, dozens of employees lined up, holding payslips and unpaid wage notices. Their expressions were different. Some paced anxiously. Some lowered their heads to scroll their phones. Some gathered in small groups, whispering. When Ethan stepped out, a commotion rippled through the crowd. Look! That's Director Yi. Serena Shaw's husband. No, ex-husband. I heard he's the true boss of the company. Serena's shares were all held as nominee shares. My God. Wasn't he the one moving samples for marketing before? I ate boxed lunches with him. The whispers spread like waves. A young woman in a plaid shirt suddenly squeezed out of the crowd and rushed up to Ethan. Her badge still hung from her chest. Marketing department intern. Director. Director Yi. Her voice trembled. Eyes red. I'm Lin from marketing. I came as an intern last year. The company owes me 3 months of wages. I can't even pay rent now. My mother is still in the hospital. As she spoke, tears fell. Ethan looked down at her. He recognized her. Lin had joined last autumn. She was the only intern in marketing. Every time he pushed a cart of samples past the marketing department workstations, she was the only one who would look up and smile at him. Ethan. You've worked hard. Everyone else pretended not to see him. Only she always called him Ethan. How much is your salary? Ethan asked. Lin froze. Then sniffed. Base salary is 4,500. With subsidies and commission. The total for 3 months is around 23,000. Ethan nodded and took out his phone. Opening the banking app. Send me your account. Lin did not react. An older employee beside her quickly nudged her. What are you standing there for? Send it. Lin hurriedly read out her card number. 3 seconds later. Ding. Her phone sounded. She looked down. And her eyes widened. On the screen was a long number. Followed by several zeros. Director Yi. This is 45,000. You sent too much. 23,000 in wages and subsidies. 2,000 for transportation reimbursement. 20,000 in bonus. Ethan put away his phone. You were the only person in marketing to receive an excellent rating in last year's year-end evaluation. That bonus should have been paid to you. Lin stared at her phone. Her lips trembled for a long while before she finally forced out. Thank you. Director Yi. She bent at the waist and gave him a full 90-degree bow. The crowd erupted. Me too. Director Yi. I've worked here 5 years. Director Yi. What about our wages? If the company goes bankrupt, do we get nothing? Ethan raised his hand and pressed it downward. The crowd gradually quieted. Everyone. He said. His voice not loud, yet clear enough to carry through the entire lobby. Shaw Group has entered bankruptcy liquidation. But I personally promise that all unpaid wages, severance, and overtime pay owed to employees will be paid in full. Take your badge and labor contract to the second-floor conference room to register. The liquidation team has staff assigned to verify the records. Once verified, payment will arrive within 48 hours. Not 1 cent will be missing. The lobby was silent for 2 seconds. Then, long live Director Yi. Thank you. Director Yi. Director Yi. You're a good man. Cheers surged like a tide. Some people clapped. Some wiped tears. Some were so excited they raised their badges high above their heads and waved them like flags. Ethan nodded slightly and turned toward the main doors. Behind him, applause and cheers rose higher and higher. When he pushed the doors open, sunlight poured in and landed warm across his shoulders. He narrowed his eyes slightly. Then he stepped into that light. 3 months later, on the outskirts of Donghai City, an old residential neighborhood sat beneath a gray sky. The buildings were at least 25 years old. Much of the faded yellow paint had peeled from the exterior walls, revealing mottled cement beneath. A few rusty bicycles were parked downstairs. Clotheslines crisscrossed between utility poles, full of washed-out bedsheets and children's school uniforms. On the 3rd floor, inside an old apartment less than 40 square meters, Serena Shaw's mother leaned against the headboard. Her face was still pale, but her spirit was much better than it had been 3 months earlier. Before her sat a bowl of steaming millet porridge. Beside it was a small plate of pickled vegetables, cut carefully and neatly. Mom. Eat slowly. Serena's older brother, Sean Shaw, sat by the bed, holding the bowl and feeding her spoon by spoon. The old woman drank 2 mouthfuls, then suddenly closed her lips. Sean. Her voice was hoarse. Tell me the truth. Who paid the medical bills? Sean's hand paused. Didn't I tell you? Social insurance covered most of it. And the rest. Don't try to fool me. The old woman glared at him, wrinkles gathering deeply at the corners of her eyes. After reimbursement, the out-of-pocket part was still over 20,000. You make 8,000 a month and have 2 children. Where would you get that much money? Sean opened his mouth, but no words came out. It was Chen Feng, wasn't it? The old woman said. Sean lowered his head, gently stirring the porridge with the spoon. He said not to tell you. The old woman was quiet for a while. Then she turned her face toward the window, looking at the gray wall of the opposite building and a small cluster of wild grass growing from a crack. That boy. Her voice was very soft, like she was talking to herself. That boy is too honest. Serena wronged him. He knew it better than anyone. But he still paid this old woman's medical bills. He didn't owe me anything. It was my daughter who owed him. Mom. Has he left? The old woman asked. Sean froze. Who? Chen Feng. She turned back. Her eye sockets were slightly sunken, but her gaze was unusually clear. He isn't in Donghai anymore. Is he? Sean hesitated for a few seconds, then nodded. I heard he went to Nanyang. There's a major company there. His family's ancestral business. He went back with Uncle Zhou to inherit it. The old woman said nothing for a moment. Then she slowly lifted the bowl and drank a mouthful of porridge by herself. That's good, she said. That boy deserves a good life. He wasted 3 years in our family. We wronged him. She paused, then added, tell your sister to serve her sentence properly. When she gets out, don't let her go looking for him. She isn't worthy of him. Sean lowered his head and gave a quiet At the same time, Donghai International Airport. VIP lounge. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, a Boeing 787 slowly taxied along the runway. The lights on the wings flashed in the winter dusk like the calm eyes of a giant beast. Ethan sat on the sofa by the window. A hot Americano in front of him. No sugar. No milk. He had changed clothes. A dark gray handmade suit with a sharp cut and straight shoulders. At his shirt collar was a silver eagle brooch, the century-old symbol of Zhou Holdings. On his wrist, the black dial mechanical watch had been replaced by the old Patek Philippe his father had left behind, its dial glowing a warm ivory yellow. From head to toe, he seemed to have shed an old skin. But his eyes had not changed. Still deep, dark, quiet, and unmoved. Morgan sat diagonally across from him, reading from a tablet. Director Yi. Uncle Zhou has everything arranged. Tonight's flight lands at Nanyang International Airport at 7. A car will take you directly to the old residence. The Zhou Holdings board meeting starts tomorrow at 10 in the morning. The equity transfer procedures will be formally completed then. Good. One more thing. Morgan swiped the screen. Ryan Zhao's first instance verdict came down today. Misappropriation of public funds, money laundering, and fraud. Combined punishment for 3 crimes, 12 years in prison and a 5 million yuan fine. Ethan lifted the coffee and took a sip. He did not respond. Serena Shaw's case has not been sentenced yet. The prosecutor recommended 8 to 10 years. Her defense lawyer is trying to secure leniency through confession and acceptance of punishment. The final sentence will probably be around 7 years. And her mother. Already arranged. Morgan said. 1 full year of medical expenses has been prepaid. I also had colleagues from the Donghai branch send monthly living supplies to the old woman. They will not mention your name. Ethan nodded once. An announcement sounded through the VIP lounge. Passengers traveling to Nanyang. Please note, flight HU 7301 is now boarding. Ethan stood and placed the coffee cup on the table. Morgan stood too and picked up the black carry-on beside him. Director Yi. Morgan hesitated. Before you leave, there is something you may want to see. He took a craft paper envelope from his briefcase. Its corners were slightly worn, as if it had been opened and sealed again many times. This was transferred by Serena Shaw through her lawyer. She said, "You should read it before boarding." Ethan took the envelope. On the flap was a sticky note with one line written on it. The handwriting was steadier than the letter from 3 months ago. No longer as messy. But the ends of the strokes still trembled faintly. Ethan Yi. I know you will not forgive me. I'm not asking you to. But I have to say this one word, thank you. Ethan held the envelope for a few seconds. Then he folded it once and tucked it into the inner pocket of his suit. Let's go, he said. He walked toward the boarding gate. His pace was neither fast nor slow. Every step was steady and solid. His shoes landed on the soft carpet with almost no sound. Morgan followed half a step behind him, his footsteps hidden in Ethan's shadow. The lights along both sides of the boarding bridge gave off a warm, gentle glow, like a corridor leading into the sky. When Ethan reached the aircraft door, he paused. He turned his head and looked through the window at the world outside. Donghai's skyline was bathed in a faint golden glow in the dusk. Towers rose one after another. Traffic flowed like a river. Far away, the sea shimmered like a vast moving oil painting. He had stayed in this city for 3 years. For 3 years, he had moved samples, fixed printers, crouched on construction sites, and drunk himself sick 17 times. No one knew who he was. Everyone treated him like a joke. A useless husband living off his wife. A nominal director unworthy of the boardroom. A failed man who could not even keep his own wife. And now, Shaw Group had entered bankruptcy liquidation. Serena Shaw was writing letters of repentance in a detention center. Ryan Zhao was counting ceiling tiles behind bars. The shareholders and executives who once laughed at him in public and mocked him behind his back were now asking everywhere for Director Ye's contact information, wishing they could bring their faces to him and let him slap them again. Those people would never appear in his world again. Ethan withdrew his gaze. He stepped into the cabin. Behind him, the cabin door slowly closed with a heavy click, like a thick door shutting for good. Nanyang International Airport. Outside the arrival hall windows, the sky was dyed in broad patches of orange-red sunset. The edges of the clouds were trimmed with gold, as if God had outlined them with molten metal. When Ethan walked out of the arrivals hall, a humid sea breeze rushed toward him. It carried the scent of palm leaves and salty seawater, so familiar it made the tip of his nose sting. This was Nanyang, the place where he had been born, the kingdom his father had built from nothing, the hometown he had left for 3 years. On both sides of the passage stood rows of bodyguards in black. Every one of them stood over 6 feet tall, wearing sunglasses and earpieces, hands folded neatly in front, posture straight as 2 walls. Between them was a passage about 2 meters wide, leading directly to the exit. At the end of the passage waited a black Rolls-Royce Phantom. The body of the car shone like a mirror under the warm airport lights. Beside the car stood Uncle Zhou, still in that dark gray Zhongshan suit, buttoned to the collar. His hair was slicked back. In his hand was an ebony cane with an eagle carved on the handle. When he saw Ethan emerge, Uncle Zhou's face broke into a smile, wrinkles gathering deeply at the corners of his eyes. "You're back," he said. Ethan walked over and stopped 2 steps away. I'm back." Uncle Zhou looked him up and down. His eyes paused on the new suit for 2 seconds, then returned to his face. "You got thinner." "So did you." Uncle Zhou laughed loudly and clapped him on the shoulder. The force was heavy, warm, and unmistakably elder-like. "Come on. Let's go home and eat. Your aunt has been stewing beef brisket for 3 days, waiting for you to come home and open the pot." The corner of Ethan's mouth lifted slightly. He bent down and got into the back seat of the Rolls-Royce. A bodyguard closed the door gently. It made a deep, weighty sound. The car moved smoothly out of the airport and merged into Nanyang traffic. Outside the window, palm trees swayed in the evening wind. Neon signs lit up one after another. Street food stalls gave off curling smoke. And even through the glass, he could almost smell the aroma from woks tossing over fire. Ethan leaned back into the leather seat and watched the street scenes fly by. Everything was both familiar and strange. Familiar were the old streets, old shops, and old trees. The banyan tree he had climbed as a child was still there, its crown larger than before, its aerial roots hanging like dark brown curtains. The old man selling coconut ice on the corner was still there too, with the same rusty tricycle and the same faded sign that read 20-year-old shop. What was unfamiliar was his own identity. 3 years ago, when he left Nanyang, he had carried only 100,000 yuan in cash. Not even a credit card. He had told himself. Within 3 years. I will not rely on the family business. I will not rely on my father's name. I will carve out my own path. He had done it. In the most embarrassing way. With the least noticeable identity. But also in the cleanest way. He had not used 1 cent of Zhou family money. Had not once played the card of being the shipping king's son. Had not allowed anyone to know who he was. He had used 3 years of silence and endurance to gain a clean ending. The car stopped in front of a 3-story old villa. The courtyard was not large. But it was spotless. A path of blue stone slabs ran through it. On both sides grew clusters of bougainvillea. Purple-red flowers blooming like flames. The iron gate was covered in creeping ivy. Its leaves rustling in the night wind. Ethan opened the car door and stepped out. Standing in the courtyard. He took a deep breath. Flower fragrance. Sea wind. And damp earth mixed together. Filling his lungs with something heavy and warm. For the first time. He felt the stone pressed against his chest for 3 years crack open. Footsteps sounded from inside. A round-faced woman in an apron hurried out. Wiping her hands on the fabric. Her face full of joy. "Chen Feng. You're finally back. Come in. Come in. The soup has been simmering all day." It was Aunt Zhou. Ethan smiled and called her Auntie. Aunt Zhou grabbed his arm as if pulling her own son inside. "You've gotten so thin. Did you not eat properly in Donghai? Your Uncle Zhou said you ate boxed lunches every day. My heart hurt just hearing that. Come in. Tonight I made beef brisket, steamed fish, shrimp, and your favorite taro braised pork from when you were little." Ethan was pulled across the threshold. Warm air wrapped in the smell of food rushed toward him. In the living room, warm yellow lights glowed. Old rosewood furniture had been polished until it shone. A table full of dishes was set. Bowls and chopsticks neatly arranged. Steam rising everywhere. Uncle Zhou followed behind with his cane. Slowly entered. Sat at the head of the table. Picked up his chopsticks. And tapped the edge of his bowl. "What are you standing there for? Sit. Eat." Ethan sat at the table and accepted the rice bowl Aunt Zhou handed him. The rice was piled high. White and glossy. Each grain covered in a soft sheen. He picked up a piece of beef brisket and put it in his mouth. It was tender and deeply flavored. Rich with sauce. With the faint spicy warmth of ginger and cinnamon. It burned his tongue slightly. Aunt Zhou sat across from him. Watching eagerly. "Good." Ethan swallowed and nodded. "Good. Then eat more." Aunt Zhou looked as happy as if she had won the lottery. She placed 2 pieces of pork in his bowl. Glossy and fatty. With crisp edges. "Look how thin you are. Your face has hollowed out. Eat meat. Meat builds people back up." Ethan smiled. This smile was shallow. Yet compared with the meaningful smile he had shown 3 months earlier in the Donghai banquet hall, it held true warmth. Uncle Zhou took a sip of yellow wine and spoke slowly. "Tomorrow morning's board meeting will complete the procedures. Then you'll officially take over. The Nanyang business is larger than you think. This year, the group is opening 3 overseas ports. The Singapore partner has been negotiating for half a year. All that's left is for you to make the final decision." Ethan nodded. "I know." Uncle Zhou set down his glass and looked at him for a while. "One more thing. The fund your father left allocates 20 million a year for charity education. I managed it before. Now it belongs to you. What do you think? Continue with education? Or change direction?" Ethan's chopsticks paused. He thought of the wrecked lobby of Shaw Group 3 months earlier. The employees crowding around him. Asking whether their wages would be paid. He thought of Lynn's red eyes. And her trembling shoulders when she bowed. He thought of the suppliers clutching their account books. Faces dark as they blocked the entrance. "Continue with education," he said. "But add one more condition." "What?" "Priority for children from poor single-parent families." Uncle Zhou glanced at him. The corner of his mouth moved slightly. He did not ask why. He only said, "Fine. I'll have the secretary revise the charter tomorrow." Aunt Zhou filled another bowl of soup for him and kept fussing. "Drink more soup. I simmered this for 6 hours. Dried scallops. Fish maw. Cordyceps flowers. It restores energy. Look at the veins on the back of your hand. You never used to see them so clearly." You've gotten too thin. Ethan accepted the bowl and lowered his head to drink. The soup was fresh, sweet, and hot. It slid down his throat, spreading warmth from his stomach all the way to his limbs. Outside the window, night had fully settled. Nanyang's night sky was different from Donghai's. The stars were brighter and more numerous, densely spread across the heavens like someone had spilled a jar of crushed diamonds over black velvet. Wind moved through the bougainvillea in the courtyard, petals falling into the gaps between the stone slabs, carrying a faint fragrance. Ethan set down the soup bowl and leaned back in his chair, looking at the star-filled sky beyond the window. 3 years. 1,095 days. In Donghai, he had been a shadow, a joke, a useless man whom others mocked for not even being able to produce 37,000 yuan. But all of that was over, like a dream from the night before. When morning comes, the dream fades. Tonight, he sat at the dining table in the old Nanyang residence. Before him were beef brisket, braised pork, and fish maw soup. Across from him were Uncle Zhou and Aunt Zhou, their faces warm with smiles. Tomorrow, he would be the person at the helm of Zhou Holdings. The kingdom his father had left him would have to be carried forward properly. Ethan lifted the cup of yellow wine Uncle Zhou had pushed toward him and took a sip. The wine was slightly spicy, with the mellow aroma of age. He looked at the endless stars outside the window, and the corner of his mouth slowly curved upward. It was not a cold smile, not mockery, not that calm, almost merciful smile he had worn 3 months earlier in the Donghai banquet hall. It was a real smile rising from the bottom of his heart, like the first warm current flowing beneath a frozen river after the ice finally cracks. Uncle Zhou, he said. After the meeting tomorrow, come with me to see my father. Uncle Zhou's hand paused slightly around his cup. Then he nodded softly. His voice was lower than usual. Okay. Ethan drank the rest of the yellow wine in one motion. The bottom of the cup touched the table with a clear ding. Outside the window, the Nanyang night wind passed through the palm fronds with a rustling sound, like someone quietly reading a very long story. And the first 3 chapters of that story, how a man hid in the valley for 3 years, how he sharpened his blade inch by inch under cold eyes, had already been turned over. From tonight onward, a new chapter began. That's all for today's story. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment.